How much money am I going to make this year? Why does it not seem like I am taking home as much as I would like? Would you like to understand what your revenue is running, what it will be at the end of the year, what your profit will be at the end of the year? Understanding how things are looking in your business and your run rate is hugely important. You can't just be like, well, it's 3 million. We're just going to go out and do that. You got to put some meat on it. You got to have some action.
This is the Bender CFO Podcast, where we empower business owners to gain financial clarity and maximize growth.
Hey, I'm Shane Bender with Bender CFO Services, and I am spending some time with you talking about how you can make better decisions for your agency. Once again, I'm focusing on working with marketing agencies and how this particular forecast works for marketing agencies. But if you're not a marketing agency, if you're service-oriented, I do think a lot of the things relate. In a product situation or manufacturing or other construction, it is a little different, but a lot of the concepts are similar. So I just wanted to start with that. But here's the questions that you're probably asking. How much money am I going to make this year? Why does it not seem like I am taking home as much as I would like from a distribution standpoint, from a pay standpoint? Or where's my profit? Where's my cash going? There's something that doesn't feel right and you don't know what it is. Or maybe you've just been looking at your bank account, like, where's the money going? And looking at your bank account could be good and could be bad. Sometimes it makes you feel really good, and that might not be a good thing because it's like you just got a bunch of money that came in, but that doesn't mean that you actually have a client that they get a bunch of money at the beginning of the year. It's a pretty large agency and their bank account's going to look really good at the beginning of the year. And they could, in fact, when I first started working with them, I got their P&L and it's like there was all this profit in the first quarter, first half of the year, and the numbers looked great, but they were operating a little bit more in a cash-based situation. So if you actually looked at what was happening in their business as far as the revenue and the services that they're providing in each month, like you actually look at the activity, they were actually not profitable. Or in the cash-based situation, what's going to end up happening is you're going to have all this cash and the bank account's going to look great, and then it's going to keep going down through the summer's going to go down, the fall's going to go down. Then you're going to get really nervous because this is a client that gave you this money for the whole year and you don't have enough money to pay everybody through the end of the year because you haven't been tracking that. So that's another problem. Bottom line, hey, if some client wants to give you money for the whole year, the whole quarter, I'm all for billing and collecting that as soon as possible because cash is king, and if you get the cash sooner, you have more options. But on the other hand, you got to understand your profitability. And so we're going to spend some time today going a little further into talking about revenue. The last time, what we did is we talked about revenue. We talked about understanding your existing revenue. I share my screen here, but to go into the details, as they say, look under the hood. What do we do? What are we doing in our growth and profit engagements? This is what we do initially with any client. And if you can stick with me through these videos, you're going to understand what it's going to look like at the end. Would you like to see a report like this? Would you like to understand what your revenue is running, what it will be at the end of the year, what your profit will be at the end of the year? And of course, I'm not going through every tab right now, but how that affects your cash, because that affects this balance sheet and your cash flows. Would you like to know that number? Would that be highly valuable? So last time what we did is we talked about existing revenue. In this scenario, we had a business that got to 4.1 million. I appreciate you taking some time to watch this video. If you have any questions that you want me to answer and you want to book a meeting with me, please click on this QR code and book some time so we can talk about your business, your challenges, your specific concerns. I would love to meet you, but let's have a meeting. And that came from this existing revenue tab where they had spent some time understanding all their clients, all their services, and how they earn revenue each month from actual run rate, actual historical standpoint, and their current contracts and how that's trending out for the rest of the year. And you can go out into the next year if you want, but understanding how things are looking in your business and your run rate is hugely important. I mean, I can't tell you how important it is. And please do not say, I don't know the number. I don't have the number. Put something in there because you are staffing your team for something. Now, here's the thing. We're going to go back to the P&L. Revenue, you guys have revenue goals. And when you do this at the beginning of the year, you might have a run rate of 500,000 a month. 500,000 a month is going to be 6 million if you just keep it that. But guess what? You're going to lose clients. I'd like to believe that we keep all of our clients, but we will lose some of them. So if you don't get any new clients, you're not really going to end the year at 6 million in that scenario, 500,000 a month. You're going to lose some clients. So you might actually end the year more like 5 million or 5.5. Let's just say you have a goal for it to be 8 million. So you're at a run rate of 500,000 a month. That's 6 million. And you tend to lose clients every year. We'll just say you're going to lose $1 million. So after attrition and everything, I know no one wants to believe they're going to lose any clients, but just bear with me here. And now you're at 5 million, but your goal is 8. Your goal is 8. You started, you talked with your team, your goal is 8 million. 8 million means that you have a new business target that you got to get, whether it's from existing clients or from new clients of 3 million. Where's that coming from? How are you going to get that? You can't just be like, well, 3 million, we're just going to go out and do that. You got to put some meat on. You got to have some action. Do you have a CRM? Do you have a system like HubSpot or Salesforce or something to track all that? Because these are new business opportunities. How is that going to break out between your upsell opportunities? Because remember, I've said before, upsells are a little bit more of the low-hanging fruit. If you have another service completely that is not being utilized by that client, that's an upsell opportunity. Or in the marketing world, it could be simple as they need to increase their budgets because they get a good ROI over here. So if they spend more, and then you're going to make more money because you're based on a percent of media. That could be it. There's a number of different ways that existing upsells can happen, but ultimately what you want to do is understand that. So we're going to go and take a look at this tab. This is a little template, and if you have a CRM and you're a large organization, then you should be able to track all this in that template. And ultimately what you want to do is you want to track your new client opportunity. I'm just going to say new client. You're going to have the new client opportunity in there. You're going to have maybe the service. You could have the service. I think the service is a little bit more helpful when you're talking about upsells, because sometimes the services get a little more challenging to break it out and people get confused. But at the end of the day, you're like, hey, you really didn't have the client. What is the potential revenue that you could get from that client? You're like, I think that client could pay me $100,000. Well, we'll just say $120,000 because that's $10,000 a month. $10,000 a month, $120,000. I don't think that we're going to be able to close that deal. Everybody's going to close that deal next week. So when is it really going to close? Be reasonable. The probability and where you are in the sales cycle is going to help you understand this. If you just had a conversation with somebody, first of all, you're not going to put anybody on here that is just like unclear in the sense that you don't really have any numbers. You haven't even had a meeting yet, or your initial meeting was just very preliminary. Sometimes we'll put 25% probabilities in here, and that can be helpful to list out all your 25% probabilities. But what's really going to move the needle? And first of all, let me clarify probabilities. Having different probabilities is helpful. Having too many different percentages get a little bit confusing. 50 or 60%, different systems use different things, but I wouldn't have too many different percentages. I'd have a 25, 50 or 60, maybe 75. 90 in the sense is, hey, you've already got a verbal commit, you're waiting for a contract, something like that. In this case, we just gave them a proposal. And I'm gonna do 50%. I've always liked 50%. I think I had a client that was doing 60, and so let's just say we have done a proposal, we've talked to them, but we know we're up against somebody else. And maybe if you have historical information on this is really great. So we tend to win like half of those deals. That's even better if you have that much understanding. We think this is going to start in August, and it's 12 months. Filled that out right there. Eventually we start to add more months into the next year. But like you can see how this is, okay, we're only going to put half of the revenue in there because this is prorated. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to figure out is of all the opportunities that are out there, how much revenue logically will hit based on probabilities and where you are in the relationship. This is very difficult because we don't really know. You have these opportunities. The pipeline's important, so you know that you have the opportunities. The annual revenue is sometimes unclear. When it's going to close is sometimes unclear. Probabilities are sometimes unclear. So you just have to have a methodology. Your probabilities can be based on historical run rates. If you feel uncomfortable about the revenue or the probability, just lower it, but be reasonable and don't put a bunch of 10%, 5% pie in the sky stuff in there because that just messes it all up. But I would suggest putting them in there because you want to know your pipeline, because your pipeline's small and you're trying to close this $3 million gap. Let's say the scenario I was giving you before, where you're after attrition, it's $500,000 a month, but you need, or it's going to be $5 million for the year, a goal of $8 million, and your pipeline's tiny, you're not going to hit, you're not being reasonable. you don't have a big enough pipeline for that to work. And I know the pipeline changes all the time, and I work with clients all the time. And trying to get that pipeline stuff updated is sometimes difficult, but I really strongly suggest doing this and looking at this monthly and understanding what are all the opportunities out there. So in this scenario, you list them all out, and this is a new client section. This is an upsell section. Same concept works for upsells. This number feeds over to the P&L. And in this scenario, we don't have a ton in there. The question is, are you fine with that number? Maybe your goal was 5 million in this scenario. So, oh, wait, we're only on track for 4.4 based on our pipeline and everything. We had an original goal of 5 million. So we have a $600,000 gap. You could just plug it and put it in unidentified, but I already got some unidentified in here. I got $10,000 more each month. I'm putting some unidentified in there. You could put more. You got to be careful with that, because it can make all your numbers look a lot better. I have clients that don't like to put much unidentified in there. And I have other ones that at the beginning of the year, everything seems great and you put them in there. But as the year goes on, they just start cutting that down. But a lot of times what you could do with unidentified is look at what you've done historically, like how much new business have you closed historically in a given year. Same works with attrition. So all of that's hugely valuable in understanding your revenue. So once again, you want to get your existing revenue figured out, your upsell opportunities figured out, your new business opportunities, and that tells you your revenue. That tells you what your ongoing revenue should be and how you want to staff accordingly. So that leads us to the next phase in this, and that's going to be your staffing expenses. How are you going to staff? What are your metrics you're looking at? As you can see in this scenario, we are keeping this in the 50 to 60% range. So that's good. We could also look at revenue by head, by person. That's another metric you could look at, but that is hugely important, is to understand right now, how is your margin looking? Because if your margin starts to dip, you may have too many people. And so we're going to talk about expenses next. Thanks so much for listening to the Bender CFO podcast. Help us out by subscribing on YouTube so you don't miss another episode, or listen to us on Spotify and rate us 5 stars so more people can get this content to help their businesses grow and be successful.